Hi, Mark, and today I want to talk about Brexit and Nigel Farage. Almost 7 years after the historic referendum, the Brexit champion Nigel Farage now also admits that the British exit from the EU was a failure. We have not benefited economically from Brexit, although we could have, is what Farage said on BBC television on Monday evening. Unfortunately, what Brexit has shown is that our politicians are just as useless as the Brussels commissioners. Brexit was a failure. In the interview, Farage was confronted with the exploding numbers of migrants, the labour shortage, and the weak economic development in Great Britain. The only reason we won the referendum was because people thought that by controlling our borders, the numbers would go down, and he meant the migrants. In fact, the numbers would now explode. In this regard, the ruling Conservatives had committed a breach of trust. That's what he criticizes. In addition, legislative decisions in the economic sector would drive the companies out of this country. No, Farage, Brexit does. We are in control, but we regulate our companies even more than we did when we were members of the EU, said Farage, who did not rule out a political comeback against this background. Oh boy. In this context, Farage criticized his former comrade-in-arms Boris Johnson and his Conservative Party, which is still in government. We didn't make Brexit, and the Tories disappointed us very, very much, Farage said. In fact, the numbers would now explode, as I said. In this regard, the ruling Conservatives would be not a good thing in his eyes. And in addition, legislative decisions in the economic sector are a failure as well. But in 2017, the Brexit driver announced in a radio interview that he would leave Great Britain if the exit from the EU turned out to be a disaster. We are in control, but we regulate our companies even more than when we were members of the EU. So this is a disaster, but why hasn't he left? Well, everybody will wonder about this. Now he's talking about a comeback. From his point of view, the country would not be better off in the EU either. However, the United Kingdom has so far not benefited economically from the historic step. He always blamed the ruling Conservative Party for not delivering. A government spokesman rejected the allegations. As an example, he cited alleged benefits for agriculture. Sorry. We have a fairer system tailored to post-Brexit UK farmers, they said. Seriously. The British economy has struggled to recover from the triple shock of the corona pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and the turmoil caused by Britain's exit from the EU. Economic Organization OECD forecasts that UK GDP growth will be the second worst of major economies after Russia. And according to experts quoted by the British Independent, British gross domestic product, that means the economic output, would be 4% higher today if the British had not left the EU. Farage also accused the current government of not having regained control of the borders, as I said, as he had promised in the run-up to the Brexit vote. On the contrary, immigration figures are at a record high. Asked if he was considering a political comeback to address the government's failure on Brexit, Farage replied, "Well, I wouldn't rule it out. It's not high on my list, but frankly, we haven't gotten anywhere on the borders or on Brexit." As head of the UK Independence Party UKIP and as an MEP, Farage had been campaigning for his country's exit from the EU for years. In doing so, he hit the Conservative Tories in particular, whose boss and Prime Minister David Cameron then announced an exit referendum before the 2015 general election. Because Cameron surprisingly won the election, he had to implement his announcement. The referendum narrowly ended in favour of leaving the EU because neither the Tories nor the opposition Labour Party were united in favour of remaining in the European Union. After turbulent negotiations with the European Union and 2 early general elections, Brexit was completed at the end of January 2020. Farage left UKIP in 2019 and joined the newly founded Brexit Party, which he led until 2021. The party changed its name to Reform UK after the UK left the EU. A few years ago, Farage announced, as I said, that he would leave the UK if Brexit didn't work out, and his emigration was now mockingly expected on social media. Farage was one of the most vocal supporters of leaving the EU, along with Boris Johnson, and critics accused the politicians of having built their election campaign before the 2016 referendum on lies and false information. According to analysts and authorities, Brexit has done enormous damage to the British economy. But Nigel Farage played a significant role in the Leave campaign during the United Kingdom's referendum on the EU membership in 2016. As the leader of UKIP at the time, Farage was one of the most vocal advocates for Brexit. Farage campaigned tirelessly for the Leave side, focusing on issues such as immigration, sovereignty, and economic independence. He was known for his charismatic and populist style, often using emotive language to appeal to voters who felt disconnected from the EU and disillusioned with mainstream politics. Farage was instrumental in galvanizing support for Brexit among certain sections of the population, particularly those who felt left behind by globalization and concerned about the perceived loss of control over national decision-making. His anti-EU stance resonated with many who believed that leaving the EU would restore British sovereignty and enable the country to regain control over its borders and its laws. During the referendum campaign, Farage participated in numerous debates and public events where he passionately argued for the UK to leave the EU. He also utilized social media and traditional media platforms to communicate his message to quite a wide audience. While Farage was not directly affiliated with the official Vote Leave campaign organization, his presence and influence as a prominent Eurosceptic helped shape the broader narrative around Brexit and mobilize support for leaving the EU. His campaigning efforts played a significant role in shifting public opinion and contributing to the ultimate outcome of the referendum, with 51.9% of voters opting to leave the EU. Nigel Farage has been a long-standing Eurosceptic and advocate for the UK's withdrawal from the European Union. He became the leader of the UK Independence Party, UKIP, in 2006 and held the position for multiple terms. Farage used his position within UKIP to push for Brexit and build a political platform centered around Euroscepticism. Farage's charisma, speaking skills, and ability to connect with voters made him a prominent figurehead of the Leave campaign, although he was not officially a part of it. He had a strong media presence and frequently appeared on television, radio, and public events, effectively conveying the Eurosceptic message and rallying support for Brexit. And Farage and UKIP were actively involved in grassroots campaigning and organizing rallies, public meetings, and door-to-door canvassing efforts across the UK. They targeted areas where Eurosceptic sentiment was high, particularly in working-class communities that felt neglected by mainstream political parties. Farage's messaging revolved around regaining control over British sovereignty, borders, and laws, and he argued that leaving the EU would enable the UK to have greater control over migration and trade policy. Farage often highlighted concerns about EU bureaucracy, loss of national identity, and the perceived democratic deficit in EU decision-making, which contained a lot of lies as well. While Farage was not officially part of the Vote Leave campaign, as I said, he collaborated with and supported pro-Brexit organizations and politicians, including Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, and the official Leave campaign as well. And Farage's endorsement and campaign activities helped unite different Eurosceptic factions and consolidate support for Brexit. Farage campaigning efforts, combined with broader anti-establishment sentiments and dissatisfaction with the EU, played a crucial role in shifting public opinion towards supporting Brexit. His populist approach and ability to connect with disaffected voters resonated with many who saw leaving the EU as a means to address their grievances and the wonderful Take Back Control. Following the referendum, Farage continued to be involved in British politics and remained a vocal advocate for Brexit during subsequent negotiations and debates. He played a role in shaping public discourse around Brexit and exerted pressure on the government to uphold what he saw as the true spirit of leaving the EU. Overall, Nigel Farage's role in the Leave campaign was instrumental in mobilizing support, but also in shaping the narrative and influencing public opinion in favor of Brexit. His leadership and Eurosceptic messaging indeed played a significant part in the eventual outcome of the referendum. And so he is one of the major figures to blame for the condition the UK is in nowadays. And he is still using his old narratives because now he says Brexit is a failure because this is not the Brexit we are voting for. Well, in another video, I made absolutely clear what people voted for. And if you, well, for the ones that still know what really was on the ballot paper, on my games channel, there's still the newest video is the Brexit quiz. So you will need that knowledge to answer questions there. So have a look and play that game. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.